And then we're going to make it available on a link, and only the people that paid for the course get the link for it. So I want to welcome the people that are here so far to webinar number 2 of 10. We have lots of other ones available, and hopefully you had a chance to see the blue brochure to see what else we have available. Of course, we had to pivot this year, and instead of doing in-person courses here in Markdale, we had to do online ones. So I thank you for supporting our programming and being okay with it in this brand new platform. We've had one so far and it was a lot of fun, so I know it will continue in that stream. We would appreciate you muting your microphones when Christine is talking. You may think you're not making any noise, but I've had experience where there was a heavy breather on one of my meetings, and he was making so much noise that the screen kept going to him instead of the speaker. So that's why we ask everyone to mute. And I had to try and mute someone last week and almost killed my main speaker's volume. So if everyone does it for me, then I don't make mistakes. If your internet is unstable, in our house, we have learned that if we shut off our video, our own personal video, that helps. We shut everything off in the whole house, other computers and phones and everything. So if you need to do that, please do. If you have questions during Christine's presentation, please type them in the chat box. And then at an opportune pause moment, I will voice the questions for Christine. We will have live verbal questions at the end, but during the presentation, we thought it'd be easier if we just did it in the chat box.
Actually, Lori, if somebody raises their hand during the presentation and wants to speak a question out loud, that's a lot faster than typing it. I'm okay with that.
Okay, well, we'll do that. Well, that sounds great. You can, I think all of you guys know we're all seasoned Zoomers, but you can change your view up there at the top if you need to. Like I said, we will be recording this. We have set a fee for this course because who knows how long this is going to last in terms of doing virtual courses, and Gray Ag really relies on the revenue for this stream for our courses. So we appreciate your support in that. If you haven't already paid, please make efforts to do that. And Nicole sent you an evaluation link as well. Please make sure that you fill that out because that helps us determine content for the future. We can't do this any year without our facilitators. So we want to thank Christine for today, Christine Brown. She's facilitating it for us today, and many other OMAFRA people have stepped up to the bar to help us like they always do. And this is a quick bio of Christine, and I welcome Chris and Craig who have came on board. So Christine Brown is a field crop sustainability specialist in the field crop unit of OMAFRA and normally works out of the Woodstock office. You can see that she's not doing that these days. She works with farmers, researchers, and industry to maximize the nutrient efficiency of manure and organic amendments while trying to minimize nutrient loss to the environment. Christine has been involved in the development of the nutrient management software for many years and is excited about the newest version just released and the tools currently under development. Christine lives near Belmont on a small cash crop farm with her family. So we welcome those that have just arrived, and I'm going to turn it over to Christine.
Thanks, Lori. So I thought what I would do is I would start with a little bit of an overview of the new AgriSuite tools. And then once I've gone through the overview, then we're going to jump right into the actual program and use some of your numbers. If one person wants to give their example, and we'll work through a couple of the software screens and give you an idea of how it works, what it can do. But the other thing that I'm hoping is that through the discussion of some of the screens, that we can just talk about some of the issues, some of the questions that you have about manure and organic amendments. So I'm going to start by sharing the screen. Okay. And I'm assuming you can see it. Okay. So the title, obviously, new AgriSuite tools. I don't know what everybody really wants to learn about the software, but I'm just going to give an overview of what it can do. We do have the old AgriSuite that a lot of the nutrient management consultants use, but it's the platform that it's on is not going to be supported for very much longer. And so as a result, we decide, okay, if we're going to do this over again, how can we do it so that first of all, so that we can use it on phones and tablets and computers. But secondly, how can we do it so that it's easier for farmers to use, so that's not complicated? And so what we thought we'd do is we would develop one calculator at a time. And so people can use the individual calculators just to get really fast answers to questions, or they can use all the calculators together and do a field management plan. So when you go to the home screen, this is what it looks like. And for somebody that's using it on a frequent basis, there's the opportunity to make an account, to sign in, and that saves all your work. So if you've got a plan on the go, next time that you log in, you can go back to that plan, make adjustments, whatever. You can also just use each calculator on its own. It saves the information. Well, it doesn't really. It saves it for the next time you open the calculator, but it's really limited in what it can do. But it is good for quick answers. So, for example, if I want to figure out what my fertilizer needs are, or what my manure nutrient availability will be, I can do just a really fast calculation. So the link for AgriSuite, ontario.ca /AgriSuite, and it brings you to that home screen. And then just to go through some of the calculators that we've got right now, we've got okay, first of all, it's available in English and French. You can change the units from metric, imperial, and US on the go. So if you're used to working in imperial, but you've got a US tanker, or the tanker is in US gallons, then you can convert it at the end and just see what those differences are. And that's a pretty handy feature. Or if somebody likes metric, I'm going to tell you up front, I'm using imperial just because that's how old I am. So the first calculator, the crop nutrient calculator, it basically, if you input some of your soil test information, your crop, and your location, then it will give you the soil, the NPK needs, and it will also give you crop removal. And I'll show you that in a few minutes. The
Hey,
organic
Chris.
amendment, yep.
Chris Freiberger wonders whether we can import files from the old AgriSuite.
Eventually, but not yet.
Okay, thank you.
That's one of the to-dos, but we aren't quite there yet. So the organic amendment calculator, if you've got your either analysis information or you want to use a database information, it gives an idea of the available NPK, the micronutrients, and the dollar value from the manure that's been applied. Fertilizer calculator, it's basically blending fertilizer sources. So if you've got manure and you want to put some more nitrogen or potash on, it allows you to do that in these calculators. And then the phosphorus loss assessment tool for Ontario, the Plato calculator. It's a tool that Kevin's going to talk about next week, so I'm not really going to touch on it very much, but it determines the risk of phosphorus loss from different management practices. So if you're trying to find out what is the difference between the risk of phosphorus loss from spring application versus fall application, this tool lets you do that nicely. And Kevin's going to go into a lot more detail about that next week. So these are all individual calculators. And then the field management plan, it takes all of these above calculators and puts them together so that we can do a field management plan. So it's kind of the current nutrient management tool, only with a different look and a different feel. And then
Steve,
the one that's, yeah.
Can this be used offline?
Yes. Actually, I shouldn't say that so quick. Not in the same way. Not in the same way that the current AgriSuite can. So I think you do need a web link. Now you can save information and in PDF files and look at it again, but I think that you need web connection to make it work. The current tool that's under development is the manure storage and sizing calculator. And so it's supposed to be, it's ahead of schedule, which is something we don't hear very often. And it should be released, I think it's sometime in April. And so it's going to be able to give an idea of what manure production you would expect, what kind of storage needs, and then some of the calculations that go along with that. So the first one, the crop nutrient calculator, or the crop nutrient, I'm not sure I'm allowed to call them calculators because some of the higher ups in government don't like the word calculator because it's old fashioned, but it describes it better than anything else. But anyway, the crop nutrient tool or calculator, basically the information that you put in is the location, so county and township, your soil test information, your planned crop, whether there's some previous nitrogen credit from red clover or from alfalfa, and then your yield goal. And with these pieces of information, what it will give you is the production recommendations based on soil test and nitrogen recommendation, and then your crop removal. And I think this is a really cool tool because in a lot of cases, the amount of nutrients that are going to be applied to a field are going to be somewhere between the production recommendations and the nutrient removal. And so for somebody that's on a livestock farm that's seen a lot of manure over the years, they're going to have probably higher soil test values. And so more of the application is going to be based on nutrient removal. And we're going to go through some of these tools. This is just an overview. So then this is the organic amendment calculator. And if I put in what my manure type is, and I can use either the database of manure samples or an actual analysis. And the database is nice for giving a broad estimate. And so for somebody that's got liquid manure and wants to take an analysis at the time that the manure is going to a field, the database is a good place to start. And then when you take an analysis when manure is being taken to the field, get those results back, then it makes sense to fine tune the previous calculations. So the manure analysis and then the management information, like the application timing, is it being applied in spring? Is it being applied in fall, late summer? The incorporation details, how quickly is it incorporated? Is it incorporated at all? Is it applied to crop residue? And then the application rate. And so basically just these pieces of information gives you a summary that looks a little bit like this. So it says, okay, what is my available nutrients on a per ton or per 1,000 gallon basis, or if you're in metric, in the metric equivalents. And then based on your application rate, what are the total nutrients applied to the field? And in this case, it's 10 tons per acre, late summer and incorporated. We tried to keep the screen pretty simple. And then, okay, and then the other thing that we have is what is the estimated economic value? And that's basically the NPK equivalent of the available nutrients. So in an attempt to try and keep the screen as simple as possible, especially since it also has to work on a phone, we have a series of information icons. And I forgot to mention that on the screen before, like the information icon on the crop nutrient tool. If you've got corn, then there will be an information icon that gives basically the corn nitrogen calculator that you would find on Go Corn. So it's the corn recommendations and where the numbers come from. With the manure, with the organic amendment calculator, we've got a series of information icons. The first one gives an idea of what is the available nitrogen, what portion of that nitrogen comes from the ammonium and what part comes from the organic nitrogen. And then the nitrate nitrogen is more for greenhouse feed water, where usually the majority of that nitrogen is in nitrate form. With manure, it might say that the nitrate portion is 50% available, but there really is no nitrate nitrogen in a manure sample or in a manure. The phosphorus, this one is a little bit different. If any of you are used to the old AgriSuite, we used to show the 40% available phosphorus. We've changed that to show the full value of the phosphorus. And then in the information screen, it basically said if you're looking for, because you've got a really, really low soil test phosphorus, not all of this phosphorus would be available in the year of application, but it would be available over the first few months to a year. The next information icon is trace elements. So we try and give an estimate of what are the available nutrients. With the trace elements, assuming that you've input the details with the manure analysis or used them from the database, it will give an idea of how many pounds of each of those elements are being applied. We don't know what the availability of those elements are, just that they're being applied. And so, for example, with the sulfur, that one we do have a little bit more information. So with a 10-ton application of this beef manure, it's from an actual analysis. We would be applying about 30 pounds of sulfur. Most of that sulfur would be in elemental form, so in a slow release form, just like organic nitrogen. So not all available right away. And then the last icon is the value, the economic value. And the reason that we included this is people don't, for a lot of people, manure has always been something to get rid of, and that's changing a little bit, thank goodness. But we thought if we give an idea of what is the NPK value of just the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash that's available, then it might help. And it might help to give an idea of if a farmer is wanting to trade the manure or trade it for straw or sell it or whatever, what is the economic value? And this is just the NPK. It doesn't include the micronutrients. It doesn't include the organic matter. And it does, in this case, subtract the estimated cost of application. So in the organic amendment calculator, we use default fertilizer values. These are last year's values. They will be updated soon. And because of good crop prices, I expect that the fertilizer prices are going to be a little bit higher than this coming year. But it gives an estimated value. And for some materials, so for example, if I have a anaerobic digestate with a high pH and a lot of that nitrogen gets volatilized because it's not incorporated, then I might not get that nitrogen value. And so then it helps to determine, is it worth is it worth selling? Is it worth trading? What kind of value might I get for it? And it gives a little bit of a third party view for putting a value on that manure. The other thing that I was going to mention that in the field management plan, we can actually put in the actual numbers for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. One of the things that I like about this is it gives the available NPK equivalent. If I'm buying manure from my neighbor, I can say, yes, I will pay the value of the available NPK, knowing that I'm getting the organic matter, which in this case would be almost 1,000 pounds. I'm getting that and the micronutrients at no cost. So it's kind of a win-win, especially since I would need to buy these fertilizer nutrients anyway. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention, the other thing that this estimated economic value does is it says here is the value of that manure. But if I apply it to a field that's already really high in let's say phosphorus or potash, because the soil fertility levels are so high, it's going to take years for these nutrients to really be used by the crop. And so in a lot of cases, I might be better off to sell that manure to a neighbor and get the money up front. Then the next thing that I'm going to show you when we go through the process is the field management plan. And so I've shown you the crop nutrient calculator, I've shown you the organic amendment calculator, which are a big piece of this, but the field management calculator basically lets me look at, in this case, a field and either one crop at a time or a full rotation. So in this case, I've done corn, soybeans, and wheat. I've looked at the yields and where I've applied manure, and I've put some liquid starter and side dress nitrogen to supplement what the manure doesn't give me. And I've done it just as what somebody might do in an actual manure example. So they might put beef manure on after wheat harvest in front of the corn. Still going to put on some liquid starter, some side dress nitrogen, because most solid manure and even most liquid manure doesn't match all the nitrogen and potash needs if we don't want our phosphorus soil tests to get too high. So basically, we're mostly matching our application rate based on phosphorus. We need to supply some additional nitrogen, phosphorus, or potash in most cases. So in this case, I've got the three crops. I've got the corn, got the soybeans, and I've got the wheat. I've put in where my different nutrient applications will be. I've put in my estimated yield goals based on long-term averages. And And you'll notice that in this example, I've tried to give everything as much of its title as I can, because it makes it a lot easier. Because most of these would say fertilizer application, fertilizer application. But if I put down liquid starter or side dress N, then when I'm looking at the information, it's a lot easier to interpret. So I've done that for each of the crops. And then what I get is a nutrient balance for my 3 years. And for the old AgriSuite, we have our agronomic balance and we have our crop removal balance. So in other words, we always go to soil test recommendations first. But if the soil test levels are high enough that your recommendations come back as 0 need for phosphorus, 0 need for potash, then you're going to be going to removal. So in this new AgriSuite, what we did is we added a hybrid. And so that hybrid uses crop removal for phosphorus and potash, but it uses the crop recommendations for nitrogen. So in other words, my nitrogen recommendations for corn are almost always going to be higher than the removal. My nitrogen recommendations for soybeans and for alfalfa and legume crops are basically going to be 0 because they make their own nitrogen. And so if I use crop removal, I'm going to be overestimating the amount of nitrogen that's required. So our hybrid uses the phosphorus and the potash crop removal, and then it uses the agronomic recommendations for nitrogen. So in this case, based on my 3 crop example, I have a balance after those 3 years of, and it's mostly because of nitrogen credits. I've got about 65 pounds more nitrogen than I actually need. I'm just under what my phosphorus removal. So basically I'm balanced with phosphorus. And in this case, I've got 6 pounds more potash than what the crop removed. The minuses and the pluses, it's just an indicator. So if you look at the grain corn here, 185 bushels per acre, I'm removing about 188 pounds of nitrogen, 78 for phosphorus, and 54 for potash. If I do that for all the crops and all the fertilizer recommendations come in with the plus, then at the end, it's just an accounting. And the pluses and the minuses are fine, depending on where your soil fertility levels are. So if my soil tests are like at my place where they're 10 or lower for phosphorus and well under 100 for potash, then I don't mind if I'm applying a little bit extra. If my phosphorus soil test is at 60 and my potash is at 250 or higher, then I really don't want to be applying a lot more nutrients than what the crops remove. So this is just a way of determining how much we need in a rotation or how much nutrients it's going to take to remove. And it gives an opportunity to try some different things. So for example, in this rotation, corn, soy, wheat with the harvested cover crops of oats, this is beef corn-fed manure. It would take, and this is an actual example, it would take 26 tons per acre would meet basically the crop rotation, crop removal. Now, most of the time we have a shortfall on potash. This manure was actually quite high in potash. So just to show the same kind of thing with beef on, actually, no, I'm going to go ahead and show some digestate instead. So if you bear with me, I'm just going to go back or forwards a little bit. Okay, so biosolids pellets, I think, Bill, you said that you were using pellets. These are pellets from Detroit, so I don't know if they're exactly the same as what you're using. But if you take a look at the nutrient availability per ton, this is on an actual analysis that I got from those pellets. There's a lot of available nitrogen and phosphorus, potash, not so much. So if we're applying it at 3 tons, which generally it gets applied at 3 tons just for economic purposes, we're applying a fair bit of nitrogen, available nitrogen, phosphorus, again, not much potash. Value of that after application is pretty good. And sulfur, we're getting about 30 pounds, at 3 tons, we're getting about 30 pounds per acre. Organic matter, almost 2 tons per acre. So it's a nice source of organic matter. It's a nice source of some of those trace elements. If we do the same thing and look at that exact same rotation, except here I didn't have a harvested crop of oats the year before, but I applied the biopellets in the spring, grain, corn, liquid starter, soybeans, and then the wheat rotation. It would take 2.5 tons, and 2.5 tons would exceed my crop rotation removal for phosphorus. So I'm adding 20 pounds more than what my crops remove. That doesn't matter if I've got low phosphorus soil tests, but if I'm high, that would be a concern if you were doing that on a regular basis. But then also notice we're deficient in that rotation of about 250 pounds of potash. And when I look at all the different manure examples that I've done in the last couple of days preparing for some of these workshops, the common denominator is that most of the manure sources we're using, we need more potash than what's being supplied by the manure. So it's not surprising to me that potash levels have gone down in so many people's soil tests over the past number of years. So 2.5 tons, if I did the exact same thing with a harvested crop of cover crop oats, it would still be 2.5 tons, but I would be taking off some of that phosphorus, and I would basically be a lot closer to balanced. I'm going to go back up to. So the other thing that we can do with the field management plan, and this is especially true with the organic amendment calculator, it gives me a chance to compare different management. So for example, if I had a finisher hog manure, so this is liquid, it is, I think it's 5,000 or 3,000, I can't remember, gallons applied in spring versus late fall, surface applied. So I'm using two extremes, obviously, but spring incorporated 1 day versus the nitrogen from late fall surface applied, almost 34 pounds versus 13. That's a pretty big difference in the nitrogen. And if I'm trying to get an economic benefit from it, probably surface applying it in late fall is not my best option. If I look at economic value, it's reflected that nitrogen value isn't there. And then the other thing, and this is what Kevin's going to talk about more next week, is in the background of our field management plan, we get little buttons, little information icons that are color coded, and it basically is doing the phosphorus index and the nitrogen index in the background without you having to put any information in. And the only time that would show up is if we've got some flags and we're doing something that's a little bit risky or dangerous. So in this case, spring incorporated 1 day, I've got a 3.7, which is a very, very low phosphorus index number. For the late fall surface applied, much higher. If I look at the average beef manure, so this is not the actual analysis, this is just an average. Again, spring applied versus fall applied, because it's a solid beef manure, solid manure, you tend to get more nitrogen availability when it's applied in the fall versus in the spring. So you don't see that same difference in the economics or in the nitrogen. And even in the phosphorus index. Now, if that phosphorus index, if I went from fall surface, if I went from incorporated right away to surface surface covered with just residue, I go from a 5 to 119. So it shows a difference in when I'm applying the phosphorus on the surface later in the season when there's no crop growing. And Kevin's going to go into that in more detail. In that in the field management plan, I showed you just the nutrient balance for the 3 years, but if you open up that screen to give a little bit more details, I've got my corn year nutrient balance, my soybean year nutrient balance, and my winter wheat nutrient balance. And that's just based on the inputs that I've done. So for the soybeans, I didn't add anything. So this is totally the crop removal. Okay, and or crop removal except for the nitrogen, which because it's a hybrid, it's the nitrogen recommendations. The reason I have a 20 here is because from the manure that's been applied, there is a nitrogen credit from the organic or the organic nitrogen component. And so that credit shows up here. What it shows here, I did something, I think I used winter application here just so that I would get this flag. You're not going to see this flags present unless there's something that's pretty high risk. And so in this case, I think I did a winter application on snow-covered soil or something like that, or maybe it was late fall surface applied. But you'll notice that I've got a red P index here. And like I said, these are working in the background with you with no extra input. It's just the numbers that you're putting in for figuring out the available nutrients. But what it says based on management that I have a pretty high risk of phosphorus leaving that field. And if I click on that information icon, this is what it shows. And this is what Kevin's going to go into a lot more detail, but it does give an idea of what is my loss from just the hills and the soil type and everything that's just field related versus when I'm applying the management and the nutrient content of the materials that I'm applying. And it does this for the manure that's applied. It also does it for the fertilizer that's applied. Another icon or another flag, I mean, is this green information flag. And what it says is basically you've got a nitrogen credit from previous applied manure. And in this case, that credit is 20 pounds, and that's what's showing up here. The other information icon is a little triangle that has, looks like an exclamation mark. And what it says is the phosphate requirements have exceeded what's needed for this cropping year, but that might be okay based on other crops in the rotation. So it's basically just saying you've got more here than what you need, but if you're removing some phosphorus from crops that aren't receiving manure or fertilizer, then in the end it might balance fine. And then the other information flag is a circle with a $sign. And that says that in this case, potash agronomic requirements have not been met. In other words, we're not meeting what the crop might need. We may see a yield decrease because of that, or we may see decreasing soil test levels for potash over a period of time. So these information flags are there just for additional information. We've tried to keep the screen looking as simple as possible so that on a phone or on a tablet or on a computer, it's easy to read, but there is additional information there as we want to go through. So I'm going to go through an actual example using some of the information from that you want to share. But what I've done in organizing for a bunch of workshops that are coming up, I made up a farm. I called the farm Manure Workshop Examples. And what I did was I took all the different manure analysis, and then I made a field for each one so that I can go back and I don't have to input the data again. But what I'm getting at is it's a lot easier when you're setting up a field management plan to do this part of it up front, to have the manure types, to have the field information up front, and then go back and look at the information. So I think, and then there's also a whole bunch of resources, videos, and a little information sheets on how to do the different calculators. They'll be updated as we figure out how to do fancier videos. Some of them are pretty crude, but they get the information across. So I guess I'm going to just pause here for a minute and see if there's any questions, and then I think we'll go through and actually look at the software. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second.
I think Bill has a question.
Anybody have any
already.
questions?
Bill does.
Good. Bill?
Yes, on when I'm entering the data into that spreadsheet, like it starts off, you got to do your farm and your field. Every time you go into a different calculator, you got to re-enter the data. It's too bad we didn't have a database where once you enter your farm in, that as you were trying to do each module, you could just use the drop down and pre-select a field that you've already put data into, and then add whether you're adding a nutrient or adding an amendment or whatever.
Right.
I always worry that when I'm entering each time that I'm gonna leave a space or a return or something, and it's gonna start off and think it's a whole different farm.
Yeah. The first time through is going to take the longest because you're getting used to the software, but in the field management plan, you should be able to put in the information and then do the drop down. The individual calculators, the crop nutrient calculator does let you do that. You can say, okay, I like what this is doing. I want to go to a full field management plan. The organic amendment calculator, I think eventually will do the same thing. So we're going to go through and I'm going to show you that as soon as I get out of show. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yes, Christine. Nutrients in the field already. We got maps of ours. We did some fields in a grid sampling and others. So it's mine doesn't really have an average P level for my field. It's going to have zones. Is that incorporated yet? Or is that still, we're going to do an average and put it in somewhere?
Yeah, it's still, we've done a lot of discussion about how to do that in the nutrient management software. And I think where we're headed is eventually we're going to have APIs. So eventually you're going to be able to get your data from the lab and you don't have to input it. And same with the phosphorus index, it'll be APIs with retail. And so there's going to be some, and I'm not a computer expert enough to know how that works, but we're trying to reduce the steps on inputting. And for soil test, it will likely be summarized, like you won't have each individual soil test in a field being put into your calculator. It'll probably be in management zones, and exactly how we're going to do that yet, we're still in discussion, but we're looking at having high yield zones, medium low yield zones, low yield zones, and potentially it may even look different than that. But it's a really good question. We are looking at how to do that so that it fits the farmer's needs. And if you have some suggestions, we're all ears.
Okay.
That's one of the comments that I would like to make. We did these calculators with the voluntary tools first. The programmers are now starting to work with the regulatory tools. So the NASM plans and the strategy and plans for regulatory purposes. We did the voluntary ones first so that people could give us input and so that we can try and make it better as we go along. So if you're trying it and you've got some suggestions, I'm not promising, but we are all ears when it comes to recommendations or suggestions on how to make it better.
Anything else?
Okay, we're going to go into this might take, hold on a sec. I got to figure out how to do this. Share screen. So can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is I've signed in and I've got, you can see all the different calculators that I've worked on. And when I worked on them, I've got two different ones going. One is the official version that's released and one is the testing version. So most of my work gets done in the testing version, but I've done this one in the real version. If I go to the home screen, so anytime I want to go to the home screen, I go to AgriSuite, or I think I can go here as well. Uh-oh. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. So this is actually where I wanted to go. So this is the home screen. I'm going to sign in. Actually, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll go back. Huh, I didn't have to sign in. That's different. So I can go to create new, but I'm just going to go to this one first. Can everybody see the screen all right? I've made it 100%. I can make it bigger if that works.
Looks
okay.
Good here. Yep.
Okay. So I have all my different. So on the side, I have just the setup of the field, and I can get rid of that if I want and make more room on the screen. But what I've done, I can create a new farm, and my new farm, I'll just call it Chris's farm. And I've got the selection of owned or leased or rented. So I'll just put in my information because it's easy. Actually, Bill, I could put in yours because I know where that is too. So that's all it takes is for the farm information. If I want to close screen so that there's more room, you just press close, arrow up or arrow down gets me that information. And then I go to field properties. And so I'm going to give my field a name, and it's going to just North Field. Is there a river going through? Yes or no? In my case, there isn't. But if there is, then it asks for the slope right near the surface water. I don't have one, so I'm not going to put it in because it's easier not to. Tillable area. And then the area for nutrients. So the only reason that this would be different is if I have a sensitive area or a woodlot or what, or not if it's tillable acres. If I have a river going through it or water and sediment control basins or whatever, it might be a little bit less because I can't put manure into the stream or the creek. So I'm just going to say 50 because that's easy. Maximum slope just gets defaulted to 7 because most people don't take time, and if the slope is 7, it probably will give a pretty high phosphorus index. In my field, it's probably more like 3%. And
Bill
this
has a
really
question, Christine.
Sure.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Bill. You might have to unmute, Bill.
Yeah, what was that? Yeah, I've entered all that things in. Which module are you in right now? You're in.
I'm in the field management plan.
Okay.
So let's go. So I want to start new. So let's go home.
Okay, yeah. So up in the corner, I can see where I've got my farm, and in a field up in the corner of that one. So yeah, I've entered that in.
So if I go to a new field, can you see my screen?
Yep.
So when I
Yep.
create a new plan, I can go to the crop nutrient calculator, the organic amendment calculator, the fertilizer calculator. So I have choices.
Yes.
I use the field management plan, but I'm going to just do this one because I want to show you. If I go to crop nutrient calculator,
okay,
and I enter my farm name, Chris's farm. It's not really my farm, but whatever. Yeah. North field area, 50 acres. My upper, so I'm in Middlesex.
But you're re-entering all that information again.
Yeah, but I'm just going to do it once, and you're going to see what happens. I'm on a silty clay loam. Oops. And heat units automatically gets populated. My soil test, I'm embarrassed to tell you what it is, but and 80 pH 7.2. And eventually there will be more micronutrients that you can add in here as well, and organic matter is coming hopefully in the next release with the App Store. Crop information, corn, yield. I usually hope for 200, but that doesn't always happen. So maybe it was the organic amendment calculator. I thought it was going to let me. And the other thing that we have is reports that you can save as a PDF file. So anything that you do in any of these sheets, you can save as a PDF. I guess it was the organic amendment calculator. Create new organic amendment. So I'm just going to go to material type, swine, database, application, spring. I'm just doing this really fast because I want to.
But like on some of the boxes, like on the season thing, you've got drop down arrows.
Yeah.
But when you went to this organic amendment, there was no drop down where you could go back and pick up that first farm you started on.
No, but if I go to, so if I go back home to all my plans, the one that
Yeah.
you can do that with the most is the organic. It's not the organic amendment. The field management plan. So if I go back to this one, my examples, my field management plan, I'm going to have all my fields and all my manure types there that I can use for drop down. And so if I've got, which commodity do you want to work with? What kind of manure?
We were doing the organic amendment, but but you could do anyone. Just
Yeah. So
if
let's start a new field. So I've got a
okay.
Chris's farm, and my field properties I started to do. My soil test for phosphorus was 10. So in the field management plan, if I enter it, it's there. I can go back and I can calculate everything based on that. So
really, when a person's starting this, that's where we should start, is probably put our stuff all in the
yes,
plan first.
Yeah. The reason we've got those other calculators is because there's a lot of people that told us that the field management plan in our existing AgriSuite, so the old version, is complicated. And so we thought if we can get people using the organic amendment calculator just to do a really quick, how much available nutrients am I going to get if I take my neighbor's manure, or what would be the approximate value of a ton of poultry manure, broiler manure, let's say. It's a really quick one-offs, but if I wanted to use this information in my fields and on a regular basis, I'm getting the same type of manure, then I'm going to go to the field management plan. And so I've got the soil test information in here. I've got the field information. So now what I wanted to do is, so I'm going to go to this part of it. And this is the part where I'm setting up my crop. And so I've got a button that says add a crop rotation, add manure, or add fertilizer. So in this field, I'll use my example, I guess. I got some digestate from Storm Fisher last fall. So we'll just use that as an example. So I'm going to add a crop rotation. And we've tried to make it a little bit easier. We've got a drop-down list of different crop rotations. We can start with this and add crops if we want. We can start and just add one crop at a time. We've just tried to make it a little bit easier just for people to use. I'm going to start with corn, soybeans, and wheat. And so I've got here 3 crops in that rotation. I've got corn, soybeans, wheat. I've got the option of choosing silage corn, grain corn, sweet corn, processing corn. Obviously it's grain. Soybeans is soybeans. Wheat, I have the option of spring wheat, straw removed, winter wheat, hard red wheat, straw with or without straw. So winter with the straw removed is probably the most common. So if I add that, then I have my 3 crops. And so from here, I can start adding manure and I can start adding fertilizer for those crops based on what I want to do or what I usually do. Any questions so far on this?
How would you incorporate red clover that would be underseeded into your winter wheat?
Okay, so if I wanted to, I can go to my winter wheat. Actually, field options. I can delete any of these crops. I can delete anything I want, or I can, and I'm going to show you another feature too that's pretty sweet. So I'm doing this the hard way. So if I wanted to add a crop rotation, and that crop rotation included red clover,
Perfect.
then I would just add that one. So
And
my
then
rotation.
Do you
No.
have it for red clover and then the cover crop after the red clover, like in with the red clover?
The red clover is part of the wheat. So this would be red clover underseeded in the wheat in the spring.
Right. And then
You-
I understand that, but then that fall, when after the wheat, we're putting in a cover crop. So then you don't, yeah. So we can't customize this to put
Yep.
in.
Yeah, you can. So you can have corn, soybeans, wheat, and a cover crop. So let's add that.
But it said there for,
No, that's not what I have though. I have the red clover in there also. I no-till into the red clover.
Okay. So yeah, you can customize it.
Sorry.
So
I'm
if
just curious.
I have, so it defaults to cover crop oats, but my cover crop, there's a whole series of choices that I have.
Oh, can I combine them too?
I think there should be a mix. That might be coming in this next version. But we are adding mixes. I guess right now I would use pea oats, but
when you picked that as cover crop, it called it 4 crops, but actually it's only a
Yes.
3-crop rotation.
that is something we're trying to figure out how to fix.
Could we go back and edited that back to a 3, even though we chose the 4?
Well, see, and that's the way I get around it. I asked for that cover crop rotation, but what I end up usually doing is add crop rotation. I use just corn, soybeans, wheat. I add that, and so then what I do is, because my corn is going to get a organic amendment ahead of time, I add a crop, and that crop is cover crop.
Oh, and then you get to choose the type.
Yeah, so I have red clover. But so then I can choose what my cover crop is, or if I want oats, I can do that too. And then if that cover crop is harvested, if it's not harvested, it doesn't matter quite as much. But if it's harvested, what is the yield of that oats? Let's say 2 tons because it's planted early. But I have to be careful with the dates. The dates are always important because it's always going to come to the first year. I'm going to need to go to 2020. It was in the fall. So, and even if you planted it in August, for in terms of the software, put down September 1st. It always works better. Because if it's August, it thinks it's the year before and it just complicates it. I forgot to put a date. September. I'm just going to put September 1st. And then what I have, now I got to get rid of some of these because I added too many crop rotations. And you can do that. You can add several years worth of crop rotation, but it makes the screen a little bit too busy. And I would prefer just to look at one rotation at a time.
Well, Christine,
Yep.
the question, I guess, is if we cover crop every year for those 3 years, we end up with 5 or 6 crops in 3 years.
Yep. Now,
So the crops aren't necessarily years. That's my question. We put it in a year, or do we put it in a crop?
I would say in your case, enter crop, but I'm going to show you something that might make it a difference. So I've got, where did my cover crop go? Cover crop oats. I must have deleted the wrong one. Okay, so I've got my cover crop. Let's say I wanted to put, I gotta get rid of this one too, sorry. So I've got cover crops, corn and soybeans, and I'm just gonna add wheat, but I'll just add it manually because, and there are all kinds of crops, like we just didn't want people to have to go through all of this every single time. Winter wheat straw removed. And I do have to put in a yield goal for all my crops.
Mm.
And how it's tilled, if it's tilled. Well, winter wheat is no till. Okay, so this just gets me the crops. Oh shoot, I forgot the date. So it's a lot of clicking, but once you've got it in place, it's nice to work with. And like I said, the first time's going to take the longest. Oh, it didn't change it. Oh, well, we'll just delete this for now. Put it in later. But if I wanted to, I'm just going to go to the soybeans for a second. If I wanted to, my yield 50 is maybe a bit optimistic. And my corn, I'm going to put the yield in just. And you'll notice that it gives township averages for yield. That's there for regulatory purposes. If somebody tries to say they're getting 200, but the county average is 150, for example. So you see with the crops, I've got my recommendations, agronomic recommendations based on soil test and location and yield goal. I also have my nutrient removal. So let's say that I wanted to add a material type. Let's say I want to add digestate. So it's going to let me, and since I've already added a bunch of the different manure types, I have a drop down menu. And so I can just go down that drop down menu and pick the material that I want. So we applied some Storm Fisher digestate. We applied it in the early fall. Actually, we applied it on October 13th. It was injected. And my application rate was, okay, so then it tells me that on a per 1,000 gallon basis, I had about 13 pounds of, I can expect about 13 pounds of nitrogen, or well, on the field basis on 6,500 gallons, 80, 95, 113 for potash, and then trace elements and value. And the value for this, here I can override my fertilizer costs. So if I know exactly what it costs me to apply, I can change those default numbers if I know exactly what I'm paying for fertilizer. If for some reason it was surface applied and I'm not expecting any value from the nitrogen, then I can make that nitrogen value of, can't use 0, but I could use, if I'm not expecting to get any nitrogen value because I applied it in, surface applied it in the fall, then okay, so I can't put 0, but I can put 0.1. 0 gives you, if you put 0, it gives you a funny number. And my cost of application was 1.3. Usable phosphate at dollars point. I can't remember what it was, but. So you notice then that I must have, oh. Makes a big difference if you charge $1.30 per gallon instead of 1.3 cents. So then it gives me a different, because I'm not getting as much nitrogen value, it changes my value. And so then I can say, okay, if I don't inject it, am I paying more to have it applied than what it's worth? And so that's part of what that economic value lets you do. The other thing, if I have early fall, and notice with this summary, right now I've got 12.6 pounds of nitrogen available. If I don't want to put in a cover crop as a crop every year, I can just say I have a cover crop existing in that field. If I'm not harvesting it, if that cover crop is there just to utilize the nutrients, just to help those nutrients take up nutrients instead of having them leach below the surface. And then notice how that changes my available nutrients. So basically what a cover crop does, so take a look, if I surface, let's say I surface applied it. This is a worst case scenario, but if I surface applied it and I surface applied it in late summer with no cover crop, I'm going to have less than 10 pounds because the pH of digestate is so high, I'm going to lose almost all of that nitrogen. But if I have a cover crop to utilize those nutrients, then my value is better. And so basically what that cover crop does is it's saying those nutrients are going to be taken up into the crop biomass, similar to what you would have if you applied that manure in late fall after corn harvest. So basically any of the nutrients that otherwise would disappear below the root zone are being taken up in the biomass. So you're not getting those losses, and that's what that cover crop does. So Martin, does that make it easier instead of adding a cover crop every year?
Yes.
Okay, because that's your other way of doing it. If you were harvesting the cover crop, then you want to add it as a crop for sure, because it's going to show nutrients removed. If you're just having a cover crop there to basically absorb the nutrients and you're plowing it under or working it under, killing it off, you're basically balancing the nutrients anyway, because anything that's being taken up, you're not removing additional nutrients. So I don't know if I made that very clear, but that's. So the other thing I can do is I can input fertilizer. And I haven't showed you this app. This is also an app that's on its own. So in my fertilizer app, let's say, I like to give it a name. So let's say I'm going to, let's say I'm going to use starter ahead of my corn. And if my corn is being planted on the 1st of May, then it's the same day. Here, how is that fertilizer being applied? Well, in this case, it's being placed with the planter. This is important for the phosphorus index. This tells you how much phosphorus potentially you could lose. So here I can go to my product names and I can add a dry or I can add a liquid. If I wanted to add, let's say 624.6 or a 618.6, I can do that. 5 gallons per acre, and it tells me exactly what I'm applying. So I can do that. If I know that my grain corn is removing 192 pounds of nitrogen, and I'm basically meeting my phosphorus needs with the digestate. Oops, what did I just do? And I still need some potash. So let's say, oh no, I'm applying more than I need, at least for this crop. in the balance of 2 years, I'm not. And here I'm going to add my wheat crop, just so that I have the 3-year date. It's going to be 2022, October 2nd. Okay, so now hopefully it shows up in the right spot. So if I look at what the digestate is providing for my corn crop, it's going to meet most of the nutrients for my corn crop. But over the 3-year rotation, even with my low soil test, I need additional nutrients. If I was going to use a hybrid, so that's based on removal, you can tell that I'm pretty short on my nutrients over the rotation so far. Now all I've added is starter and the digestate. But my material is supplying 80 pounds. I still need another 80 pounds. I'm okay with phosphorus. I still need a lot of potash. So if I wanted to, let's say in one of these crops, add some fertilizer, and I just want to show you a different method. I can say that I want to add, let's say I want to add 10 pounds of nitrogen. Just for example purposes, I want to add 50 pounds of phosphorus, and I want to add 100 pounds of potash, and I'm going to change that nitrogen just to make it easier. Let's say 40. So let's say based on the manure, this is what I still needed, and this is totally hypothetical. So I can put this in and then just pick a blend to match those nutrients. So if let's say I wanted to add those in my wheat crop, I wanted to add some potash and a little bit of phosphorus, and it might be surface applied, and I'm going to get a phosphorus index red flag, but that's okay. So what this does is it automatically populates with some of the products. So if I wanted to make nitrogen, phosphorus, potash, phosphorus is usually the element that we start with first. So I would need to add about 95 pounds of MAP to meet my 50 pounds of phosphate goal. I would need another 64 pounds of urea, and I'd need about 165 pounds of potash, or 0060, to meet this. And it would tell me my total nutrients supplied. So this is just one fast way of doing it. If I wanted to switch the urea to a different product, I can do that. If I wanted to add some sulfur, for example, I've got a whole range of different products I can use. But we always start out with the phosphorus because a lot of products have nitrogen. And if you put nitrogen as your first need material, it may short you on the phosphorus. So this is one that's probably takes a couple minutes to play with it to see what you can do. We can delete products. We can move products up higher. So if I wanted sulfur as my first thing to be met, I could choose a product and then move it up to the front of the listing. So that's just something that that we can do. I'm going to delete this. Well, maybe I won't. I'll just show you what it does. So here's fertilizer that I've applied, and you can see what it does to my nutrient balance over those 3 years. Now, if this is something I wanted to do, but I wanted to move it to the wheat crop, then I can edit that and just switch that to my year. Let's say the spring of 2023. And right now I'm just picking dates, obviously. And I would just call it spring broadcast. And it would be applied into a standing crop, not incorporated. And this is just a hypothetical example, but so that's what it shows you. So I've added my spring broadcast, probably not enough nitrogen, but so as I go through my rotation here, I haven't met my nitrogen needs, so I can add fertilizer. If I wanted to add side dress 28%, and it would probably be towards the end of May, maybe the beginning of June. And this is sorted by nitrogen sources first, then phosphorus, then common blends. If I wanted to use 28%, my application rate, what did I say I needed? I can't remember. Well, we'll see what that does. So I'm not meeting my corn needs. So if I wanted to see it, I'm looking at it here, but I can also look at it here and say, okay, for my corn crop, I'm still short nitrogen by about 55 pounds. So I could go back and edit this, make it 20 gallons, probably still not enough. Closer though. So you get an idea of how I can work with this. And if I wanted to add another manure application after the wheat, I can do that. Let's say I'm getting some biosolids pellets and I'm getting those in so I can do that. Application rate. Bill, what do you usually put them on at? 3 tons?
2 ton.
2 tons? Okay.
Yeah.
So 2 tons. I can put down that a cover crop exists. I can say that it's going to be incorporated with that cover crop. And so it gives me all this information. And if I wanted to get rid of this tree for the time being, it gives me a little bit more room on the screen. It makes this easier to see.
See, and I noticed there it's saying 14 pounds of nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Back when you were talking before, you were like talking 70 pounds or so, like available in. But I found that my sample test that I did, didn't have as much nitrogen as what some things say on that biopellet.
Yeah. So what kind of pellets are you using? Detroit or Windsor? Okay. So Toronto biosolids pellets have a different analysis.
Yes.
And they also can't be applied as high a rate because they have copper in it. So the maximum you'd be able to apply it at is a ton per year, basically, or 2 tons every 2 years. But yeah, the analysis is different, and so it's not going to have quite as high a nitrogen value. And I can show you that if you want. Except I can't remember the analysis off by heart. Anyway, so this gives you an idea though of how we go about setting up the field management plan. And then if I want to, I can go to the report. I can do all my fields, or I'm just going to do the field that we just did. I can have the content show all the different manure types that I've added. So I guess we'll do that. Detailed view, generate report. This is another place where we're trying to give the information people want, but in a format that it's easy to read, and that's easier said than done. So this is what that report looks like. If I go to PDF format, save as PDF. And I can save it. I would have liked to see what that report looked like. But anyway, it's basically a summary of this. So I've got the different materials that I used on that field, and then I've got the field information. Then I have my nutrient balance screens for each of the crops that I have in the rotation, and then the different things I've done. If I wanted to, I can have less detail, and so it's not going to give me quite as much information. It's basically going to give the same thing. So there's a different amount of detail depending on how much information you want it to save, and whether this is a record keeping or something you just want to give to your ag retail or whoever. Any questions on this so far?
The economic side of things, when you went from 15 gallons to 20 gallons,
Mhm.
as long as you have the price of the fertilizer in, does it come up as a report somewhere?
The value of the fertilizer we have not done. We haven't calculated commercial nitrogen because there's just such a wide range of what people are paying for fertilizer. I'm pretty sure that you would pay a lot less for fertilizer than I do with a small acreage. So we have not done economic value of the fertilizer.
But I
Just
thought
the
at some
manure.
point we could have added the value of fertilizer. in
We're
our own-
hoping to do that eventually. We haven't yet.
Okay.
We're trying to get the main things in there first. Is there anything anybody wants to see specifically, or an example that you'd like to try? So I can go back to the tree view. We can add a new field, or we can look at some different material types, or we can try one of your examples if you've got some numbers.
I think I'm gonna have to play with this a while. I started with the fertilizer calculator and the organic amendment calculator, and not with the field management plan. So I was kind of like starting over again when I got to it. But
yeah,
once I start with it and work back, it'll give me a better plan, because the amendment has hardly any potash in it. So I was trying to get the two of them to talk together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's what I would recommend. See, I was trying to show you how if you go to the field crop calculator, how you can keep on going to the field management plan, but that's coming in the version that's released in April. I can't do it with the current version yet. Actually, I could probably show you though.
Chris Freiberger has a question as you look into that other thing. How soon do you expect this to be ready to use or replace old AgriSuite?
Well, this is what I've showed you now is already available. It's ready to use. The manure storage sizing calculator is coming in April. The regulatory stuff is coming before the end of the summer. And then we're working on a greenhouse gas calculator and MDS. Like those are all coming in the next year. But we're always fine tuning stuff. So there's some things that we had to put on the back burner in what I showed you currently, some little nice add-ons that we'd like to have that are being done in the next couple of months as well. And then once we get most of this working, then we're looking at APIs and how can we bring in soil test and manure test values from the lab? How can we do some of that kind of stuff to make it easier? But we're not quite there yet. It sounds like it should be pretty easy, but it's not. It's
Any other questions or comments?
So we have to populate all the amendments and fill out all the different, I guess you have the basic fertilizers there, but everything else we need to populate ourselves for what we use?
Pretty well.
Okay.
If I wanted to add a manure type, what kind do you want? What kind do you want to look at?
Well, I'll do compost.
Okay. Compost. So compost is going to be solid.
Yeah.
Obviously. And there's a big range of compost, but there's a big
Yeah.
range in all kinds of,
So let's say duck. You had ducks there. Duck,
okay.
there's duck compost. Oh, okay. Can you do that? Duck compost?
Duck compost, yeah. Oh, sure, you can do duck compost. Hopefully you've got a real analysis.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I was doing that though, then I would say duck.
Oh, okay. And then type
I
is
would put the
compost.
duck compost there. So then when I'm looking at my different material types, I
It's
can
gonna
see
show.
exactly which one I'm dealing with.
Right. Perfect.
But what I was going to show you is I have the option, and right now we only have wet bases. When we start adding NASM, there will be dry bases as well, which is usually what micro heavy metals comes in. I have the option of doing a lab analysis or doing a data bank. If I do a data bank, I have the option of adding, so it's going to be a little bit harder with duck compost, but if I had poultry compost, let's say poultry manure, if I had layer manure, I would probably have something that's in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% dry matter. If I have broiler manure, it's probably going to be somewhere in that 60 to 100. But I also have the option of specifying a range. So if I know that the dry matter content is somewhere around 40%, then I might choose something like 30 to 50. And if it was poultry, well, let's just use poultry for a second. Let's say chickens. I don't have enough duck samples to show you, so then it would tell me that in that database, I have 278 samples that are giving this average.
Okay.
But if I had a lab analysis and I had my own information, that database average is still going to show up. So it's still going to give you an idea of how close are you to what that database average is. And a lot of times, can I explain that difference? And then the other thing we can do is add nutrients. So if on my, let's say I've got some biosolids and I've got the metals, I can put all regulated metals and they all check at the same time. Most of the time I don't want that. So I'm going to be interested in zinc. I might be interested in boron. Carbon to nitrogen ratio, if it's a solid, is handy. Magnesium, manganese, sulfur, organic matter, pH. I'm interested in pH. Most people don't care that much, but pH gives me an idea of how much of the nitrogen is still going to be there, especially if it's high. And I might be interested in sodium or total salts. So I can add those, and it might give me the database average. Now I have no boron samples in poultry manure, so I'll just delete that. But I've got 44 samples that have magnesium, and the average of that. Now magnesium, there's a glitch, and that glitch is my fault. It's going to give you some totally unreasonable number, only in the chicken manure. And that's because when we did greenhouse feed water, we went from percent to parts per million. And when I have the lab analysis, it's still in percent. And so I've got a combination of percent and parts per million, which don't bode well for averages. So if you wanted to use manganese, you'd have to put in your own value. So, but anyway, so I can do my own, or I can just use the database. And like I said before, database is a good place to start, but it's nice to fine tune with an actual analysis. And so I can add that to the I've got that. So then the next place I go to is the, I've added it. Did it show up? Nutrient, compost. Okay, then I go back to farm and fields. And so now my duck compost, which is really chicken manure, is showing up as one of the options that I can choose. Any other questions? I don't exactly know how long we have for this, but if anybody has questions, you're more than welcome to give me a call or send an email. It's one of these tools that there's a lot that it can do. There's a lot that you need to play around with to get an idea of how it works the best for your specific situation. But if there's any other questions.
I was just looking at one of my samples, and you show carbon to nitrogen, carbon to nitrogen ratio, and I didn't see that on my sample. Is that something you have to ask for, or is it on some
Yes.
testing?
When I take manure samples for plots that I do or for whatever, I always ask for carbon to nitrogen ratio. I always ask for pH, because those are things that they give a really good indication of how quickly some of the nitrogen will be available. So Bill, with carbon to nitrogen ratio, if I've got a beef manure, for example, and that carbon to nitrogen ratio is higher than 20:1, I know that that nitrogen is not going to be available as quickly as, let's say, a digestate that has a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 3:1. Anything that's less than 10:1, that nitrogen, that organic nitrogen, is available as soon as the microorganisms become active in the soil. If I've got a carbon to nitrogen ratio, let's say from dairy manure, that's 12:1, 13:1, 15:1, I know that I need to supplement some more nitrogen. I also know with dairy manure that if I'm applying it in the spring and it's a cold backward spring, that nitrogen availability that we show, that nitrogen is going to be there. It might not be there when the crop has its highest, the corn crop has its highest nitrogen needs. So the more things that you have in the analysis, the better idea you get of how those nutrients might become available based on weather, based on organic matter, based on other components. Obviously, a tool like this is just giving you good indications. Every field is different. Organic matter levels and weather have a huge impact in nutrient availability.
Anyone else have other thoughts? We're scheduled to finish up at 2:30, which is very shortly. But please, if you have questions or comments, now's your opportunity. Otherwise, soon we'll call it a day.
I either answered everybody's questions or I left everybody confused. But like I said, if you're going through it and if you've got some questions, send me an email, ask to or text me and say, let's talk. We can do that. I don't mind at all. I think this is really the goal. Our old nutrient management software, it seemed to be used mostly by consultants. I would really like this software to be usable to farmers so that they're getting a good idea. And at the end of the day, like I said at the very beginning, if we can make our nutrient applications so that we are fitting somewhere between the soil test values and the crop removal over the rotation, not just one crop at a time, but full rotation, I think that we have a better chance of maximizing the nutrients on the farm, not increasing or decreasing our soil tests so that we have economic issues, yield issues, or environmental issues.
Does anyone have any comments on what you've seen today? Is it clear? Are you confused?
Tanner, your smile says it all.
I think I'm going to have to play with it for a while and see what the applications are and how they're going to work out. So I'll likely be in touch with you if we get a bunch of information there that confuses me.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to work with for a bit here, because that idea of working with a rotation is something we've always done. We do our nutrient app every 3rd year and our soil testing similar. So this program's probably going to fit in to that pretty well. I'm just going to have to play with it a bit.
And like I said before, if anybody has comments on little things we can tweak to make it better, like I said before, we're not making promises because everybody has a different idea of what it should look like. But we can make changes. We are open to new ideas.
Wonderful. And I think most
Thank
of
you.
you are with us again next Tuesday when Kevin will show us the information that he has. So because I don't hear much from everyone, I want to thank Christine for spending this time with us this afternoon to try and explain, or that she has explained this tool. And hopefully you all have learned something and maybe feel a bit more comfortable as you start jumping into to play with it. And I think that's great. Do fill out the evaluation. You got the link in the information that Nicole sent you. And otherwise, we will see you here next Tuesday. And thanks again, Christine, for doing a great job as you always do.
Well, thank you, everybody. And if you want to be prepared for Kevin's next week, if you can do just one field, maybe your hilliest field, and I'm pretty sure that if share screen is an option for people, he wouldn't mind seeing some of those ahead, or hearing what people's different field. He'll be able to use some of them as examples.
Martin, did you have your hand up? You're muted, sir.
Nope, I was just waving my hand over the wrong.
Oh, it's hard to tell. Thanks everybody for joining us today. And as Christine said, if you can be prepared a bit for next week's course, that would be great. And otherwise, have a wonderful day and enjoy the sunshine out there while it's still up.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
everyone.
Take care. Great job, Christine.
Yeah, I hope that provided some of what people needed or wanted.
Tanner, do you think that was it good, or are you lost?
No, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Okay, good. And so you were playing with it the whole time, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I was trying to follow along and do stuff as she was explaining.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. No, that's what everybody should have been doing. I think maybe a few others were doing it, maybe. No, it's good, especially when she's doing it and you're doing it, you're going to learn a lot more than trying to do it later or whatever. So
Yeah, I always feel a better hands-on learner if I'm actually working at it too. So
yeah.
Yeah, and the nice thing is you can do it on the phone too.
oh yeah.
Oh, cool.
I did see that. It said mobile as well.
Yeah.
But huh.
But
Okay.
it's probably easier on a computer, especially when you're doing it for the first time, because it's just easier to see. On a
Yeah.
phone, you're just scrolling.
Cool.
Cool.
All
Okay,
right.
we'll see you next
Appreciate it.
week then.
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks again, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.